Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome back to another episode of Love and Abuse. If this is your first time, I want to welcome you to the show, and I also want to mention that all the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek the advice of a professional for your mental health and well-being. And today, this is a result of a struggle that I've had regarding a question on my mind and on the minds of many people that listen to shows like this and read material like this, and that is, should I share the material that I hear on this show and other places with the abusive person or the hurtful person, the person that's controlling or manipulative or just making me feel bad about myself? The question has come up many times. I've received quite a few emails. I've had people reach out to me and ask that question. Should I share this with my partner? Should I share this with my mother? Should I share this with the person that is being hurtful toward me? I've struggled with this because I do create this show for anyone to listen to on either side of the emotional abuse spectrum, meaning the victim of emotional abuse, I think, can get a lot from this show. But I also think the perpetrator of the emotional abuse can also get a lot from this show. So the struggle for me has been, should you share it? And I will say this. My initial thought regarding this was, yes, share it and have a discussion on it and try to work through things and try to figure things out, and maybe you'll get somewhere. Maybe you'll reach a new level of understanding with each other, especially the person who feels like the other person doesn't understand the level at which they're hurting them. And so my initial thought of, yes, that would be a good idea, share this, but also, and this is still my initial thought, also be aware that they may not take kindly to it. They may not like that you're sharing this, but it is a way to help you articulate what's happening in your life with the other person if you're experiencing this side of the coin, where someone is mistreating you or hurting you or disrespecting you or doing something that doesn't make you feel good. So you want to articulate to them how they're doing it, what they're doing, but you may not have the words to do that. So a show like this, I work on this stuff all the time. I work with people and I talk about it all the time. So I come up with the words to articulate what might be happening in your life. And so it would seem like a good idea to share this with somebody who you want to express what they're doing and the reason you're so affected by it. It makes perfect sense on paper to look at it this way, to the point where you feel like you should share it because it will help you express what's happening. However, the person doing the behavior, A, may not think they're doing anything wrong, and B, might actually use what they learn on this show against you. And that can stem from a person who doesn't think they need help and isn't looking for it. So this is where you have to be really careful. In my opinion, I think you should be really careful about what you share as far as information that you find on the person that might be in your life that is causing you grief or causing you harm. Because what can happen is that you share something like this, and I teach you all kinds of empowerment tools and knowledge on this show to help you understand what's going on and to help you become more independent and less dependent on the person doing the bad behavior. Because the more dependent you are on the person doing the bad behavior, the more control they have over you. That doesn't mean you should just drop all your dependencies. It just means you look at the areas of life that you are most dependent on another person and gauge whether they use that dependency against you. For example, there are some people in relationships that depend on the other person for most, if not all, their financial needs. If you don't have the money, then what do? So you might have to depend on someone else to do that. And if that someone else is abusive, then they use that dependency against you. I talk about that in the Mean Workbook. There are several areas of life where you might be dependent on someone, and the more dependencies you have on that person, and that person is also doing bad behavior, those dependencies will be used against you. It's sort of like someone I know right now who is just starting to make his own money because he's been dependent on his dad for so long, but his dad has been emotionally abusive all his life. And this kid is really learning how to get out into the world and get away from his dad so he doesn't have to be so dependent on him, because that dependency allows his dad to continue to be harmful to him. So this dependency exists, which means this kid has little control in his life unless he makes his own income. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are relating to this right now. What are the dependencies in your life that are being held against you in order to control you? And this is where you might have to reconsider having those dependencies, which is not easy, and it might feel impossible, but wherever you are most dependent is where you need the most work. Yes, there is probably harmful behavior going on in some relationship that you're in, but if you have any type of dependency, that harmful behavior is usually amplified through that dependency. So I want you to just be aware of any of those dependencies that you have. And this can come in any form. It can come in the form of money. It can come in the form of love. It can come in the form of family. I have to have family. There's my dependency there. If I don't have family, then what do I have? But that family could be abusive. So we have to be really careful how much value we put on our dependencies so that we don't get stuck in a toxic situation. Because sometimes those dependencies can work against us, and sometimes they are purposefully used against us. So just be aware of that and take inventory of your life and where your dependencies are to help you figure that out. But anyway, coming back to what I was saying about sharing this show, sharing resources like this with the person that might be hurtful or abusive in your life, you want to be careful because they can use this information against you. If I tell you how to be empowered, and if I tell you the right things to say, or at least something that helps you honor yourself, and that person hears what I'm telling you to empower yourself coming out of your mouth, they may just say, oh, you're listening to that love and abuse guy again. Yeah, this isn't you, this is him. Or they might say something more abusive, like, ever since you started listening to that show, you've been nothing but a jerk or a bitch, you know what. And they could make you feel bad by simply redirecting it and pointing it back at you and saying that this right thing that you're doing is wrong. So there is that aspect. And again, I know there are some of you that relate to this very well. There's that aspect. And then there's the other aspect of, do you give a helpful resource to someone that doesn't want it and isn't looking for it? So I kind of started addressing this earlier. Do you give someone that doesn't want it, doesn't think they need it, and isn't looking for it, a resource like this to help you convey or express yourself? The problem is when you do that, if they're not looking for it, they don't want to change. They don't want to get better because they think they're right. Now, that's kind of an unfair statement. I know it is, because I know there are people that listen to this show that are on the other side of this coin. I know there are people on this show that listen to this show to try to understand their own behavior. And they have written to me and they say, I am an emotional abuser and I want to change. I get these letters. There is hope. There is a lot of hope for people like this. And people who recognize this behavior in themselves, like I once did. Like I did many years ago. I started recognizing some behaviors in myself that I almost hated. I could almost say I hated them. And I could probably say that's true because I did not like myself. I didn't hate myself. I just hated the behaviors. And when I discovered that, I wanted to change them because I realized how bad my behavior made my partners feel over the years. But I didn't recognize how bad my behavior made them feel until I recognized those behaviors as being toxic and not healthy. And learning about what behaviors are harmful, basically by asking myself, if I were that person, how would I feel? Then it enlightened me to understand that I needed to change. I became enlightened, you could say, because I did not want to be that person anymore. And anyone that recognizes some behavior in themselves where they say, I don't want to be that person anymore, or I don't want to do those behaviors anymore, that is enlightenment. It's not the full totality of enlightenment, but it is absolutely a step toward enlightenment, or a level of enlightenment that is so important to follow through with. And I've already heard from lots of people listening right now and that listen to my other show, The Overwhelmed Brain, that write to me and say, like I said, I am the emotional abuser and I want to change. What do you have for a resource for me? And it has made me realize that not only do I need a resource like the Mean Workbook for those experiencing emotional abuse, and it's also for the people doing the abusive behavior, but it isn't 100% for the abuser. It is mainly for the victim of abusive behavior and the one who wants to work with their partner or the other person to figure out what they can do better. So the Mean Workbook does walk both of you through the process of learning about the behavior, the understanding of what behaviors are problematic and what you can do to start healing, or if you need to actually separate and go your separate ways, what does that mean? What's involved with that? It does talk about all that stuff, but I realize I need to create a resource specifically for the person that wants to change their harmful behavior that is specifically written for them. And that is my next goal. That is my next process for the people listening that might be on that side of the coin. There is a resource coming, and I will mention it in upcoming shows about how you can learn more about it. But just stay tuned for that. I just want to let you know that if you are on the side of the coin, that you are the person doing the harmful behavior, as I once was, then I will share my process of how I healed from it and got through it, and what you can do to heal and get through it and start changing your patterns and start changing your ways so that you are no longer wanting to control other people. And in a nutshell, it comes down to focusing on yourself and what you can do inside of you to heal. But of course, that's the simplistic explanation. It's so much more than that. But I'll get into that in a future episode and tell you how you can learn more about that. But in this episode, let me answer that question, the original question, which is, should you share this show? And I went back and forth. I've talked to clients that are in emotionally abusive relationships. I've talked to many people that I'm connected with, and I've asked them the same question. And the majority of people said, I would not share this with that person. I wanted to keep it a secret because I wanted it to be something that I learned about so I could be empowered, so I would have the knowledge for myself, not to hide it from the other person, but so there would be no interference from the other person. And they wouldn't thwart their progress in learning about themselves and healing, because the process of getting out of an emotionally abusive situation, much of it is internal. Much of it is understanding yourself, going through an internal healing process so that you show up differently, so that you aren't such a target for their control or abuse or manipulation. You want to understand your dependencies, how dependent you are on certain people for certain things, and if they are doing bad behavior, how they use those dependencies against you. And because a resource like this has a lot of good information for people on the victim side, for lack of a better term, the person receiving the emotional abuse or hurtful behavior, it can become sacred. It can become your own thing, like a safe place you can always go to and know that it is there meant for you and you alone. That way, if the other person who isn't ready to change, who doesn't want to change, who doesn't think they need to change or heal or get therapy or help, if that person hears material like this and they are hearing the same material as you, how safe do you feel then? And I know what happens. The goal of most people that share information like this with the harmful or hurtful person is for that other person to understand what they're doing to them. But if you've already tried to express it and they don't care enough to change, or they don't see that they should change for some reason, or they don't see that they're even hurting you, even though you might be crying or depressed or feeling down, and they see that you're feeling down, but it doesn't faze them enough to realize that maybe they should try to help or do something about it, they're not ready for this kind of information. They're not even at that level to want to hear anything that I would have to say or anyone else on this subject would have to say, because they're not in a space of learning. They're in a space of wanting to control, or they feed off of hurting you for some reason. That might be where they are. Or they still have a lot of fear. I mean, most of these people have fear running their life, and they fear so much they have to control you and the environment they're in. If they control all these things, then they don't have to face their fears. So this is why I'm telling you to lean against sharing. And I know some people have already shared this, and I absolutely recommend you share this with people that need it. But the person that is harmful to you or toxic in your life, if they're not asking for help, if they're not telling you, look, I realize that I'm doing things that are hurtful to you, and I don't know if I can help it. I do need help. I need to figure this out. If they tell you that on their own without any coaxing or convincing from you, then absolutely. It sounds like they're ready. It sounds like they're open. It sounds like they want to heal and they want to get better. And if that's the case, by all means. But if they don't want to get better because they don't think they need to get better, and they don't think they need to heal, and they don't really believe they're hurting you, that maybe you're hurting yourself, and maybe you're the problem and they have no problem, then don't share. I don't think you should. And if you already have shared this, don't worry, because when I create this show, I know who's listening. I know who's listening. You are listening. That person is listening. The people that don't want to change are listening. There are people listening to the show that are looking for loopholes. They're looking for ways to control and manipulate that I haven't addressed yet. There are people that don't like me. There are people that don't like me spreading this information to take their control out of the relationship. They want to continue being in control. And I've heard from those people. You've heard me talk about them before. And sometimes they reach out to me and they're not happy. And so I realize that when I create a show like this, that all of the above exists. And because I know that, I talk to all of the above. I don't exclude anyone in this show. I actually want people to have great relationships. I want you to be in a relationship with someone in your life, whether it's friend, family, or romantic, that you can enjoy talking to, and that when something happens and someone is misbehaving or treating you badly, that you can actually have a conversation about it, and your empathy and compassion, and the person who did the unhealthy behavior actually develops empathy and says, I probably shouldn't do that. I don't want you to feel bad. I want you to be happy. Love is supporting the other person's happiness. And when you love someone, you want them to be happy. Even if their path isn't in alignment with yours, even if they don't want to walk down the beach in the same direction holding hands with you, they may not be on the same path as you. You may not be on the same path as them. And you can still love someone and support their path to happiness, even if it doesn't align with yours. And that's for everyone. That is for the all of the above crowd. Anyone listening. I think the most powerful thing you can do for anyone is support their happiness in any way you can. Because people who feel supported want to be with you. Period. That is it. The people who feel supported want to be with you. People who don't feel supported and they feel chastised or belittled or judged or disrespected or put down or insulted or offended or yelled at, they don't want to be with that person. Or at least they don't feel loved. They don't feel cared for, and they don't feel happy. Happiness comes from many places, but when you're with someone else in your life who really loves and supports you and cares about you and wants you to follow your dreams and will do everything they can and will talk about the compromises and try to find balance, those are the people that you can work with, and you're not always going to agree, but at least you'll have the conversation without feeling like you have no say at all. And we do have to be diligent in our own life about who we allow into our life that doesn't support our happiness or doesn't support the path we're on. And if they're making all the rules and those rules really aren't to benefit you, it's to benefit something else or to benefit them, and there just doesn't seem to be any support coming your way, and you don't feel the love, and you feel perhaps like you're being controlled or you have all these dependencies on the other person, then the happiness wanes. It dissolves. And it's very hard to find happiness when all these other variables exist. So in a roundabout way, I hope I answered the question about should you share this or not. And I really believe that the person that you believe should hear this stuff to help you articulate how you feel and what you're experiencing, that person really needs to seek help on their own. And if they're looking for resources on how do I stop being emotionally abusive, my show will likely show up. I know I wrote an article that shows up when I put in Google, how do I stop being emotionally abusive? You'll probably find my article right at the top. But they have to want it. That has to be a self-initiated thought process. That can't be drilled in their head. That has to happen out of empathy for you, compassion for you, and healing that they know they need to do for themselves. If that doesn't exist in them, then sharing something like this is going to be premature. I just don't think it's going to work out. I'm not saying it can't. There are probably some people out there that it absolutely will be helpful, but you need to hear the call. You need to hear their cry for help, or, not crying, but you need to know that they really want help. They really want to change. They really want to do anything they can to work on themselves. And when you hear that, then yeah, it might be a good time to share. Might be a good time. And again, if you've already shared, don't worry. Like I said, I talk to everyone on this show. And if the person that you shared this with is listening now, I care about you too. I really do. I care about you. And I've been in that situation. I'm not saying that you and I are the same, that we have the same issues. I'm just saying that if you are listening to this show because you were asked to, or you're being forced to, I promise you this isn't all about blaming you and putting you in the hot seat and telling you that you're wrong. It's not that at all. I've been through the process. I've been this person that I didn't like and I didn't want to be anymore. And when you're willing to finally say, okay, I'll take a look at myself and I'll do the work and I'll do whatever I can to heal through this, because maybe there is something that I'm doing that I could probably do differently. If you're willing to do that and you follow through with it, your life gets better. I know this because I've been through too many relationships where I was never happy and they all broke up with me. And I finally decided that I was the common denominator for all these breakups. And in that moment, when I took responsibility for all these breakups, even though, it takes two, I get it, but I still took responsibility for my role in my behavior. When I did that, my life changed. I stopped walking around with emotional triggers. I became happier. I didn't feel the need to control, and all the pressure to control was gone. Do you realize what it feels like to walk around with no pressure to want to control someone else? It is liberating. It feels so good. So if you're a person that has been accused of bad behavior, or you're doing bad behavior, or you don't know you're doing bad behavior, and you were asked to listen to this show, I care about you too. I care about anyone going through this because there's always the person getting the bad behavior and there's the person doing the bad behavior. And sometimes they look at each other and they feel the opposite. They think that person's doing the bad behavior and the other person thinks that person's doing the bad behavior. And these perceptions that we carry around can really keep us in our box and make us think that we're right. And all I can say is if you've been told to listen to this show and you aren't accessing your empathy or compassion to understand how the other person feels, then you may be probably a little closed-minded. You may feel like you're not doing anything wrong and you don't need to listen to this. But if you don't access that empathy and really feel what they're feeling, and you can see, there are people that you can see the pain, you can see their tears, you can see how hurt they are. But if you don't go into that space of empathy and actually experience that yourself, it's very difficult to get on board with the idea of changing. So again, I'm talking to several different people in this particular episode, but I wanted to make sure that I covered all of this because there are people that tune in for many reasons. And I want you to heal and I want you to have the best relationships possible. And I believe what I teach on this show is a helpful resource for anyone that listens. And as we come to the close, I always say this, and I probably should reword it, but I always say share this with others that might benefit. Thinking about that now, I want you to share this with others that might be going through emotionally abusive situations themselves, or someone who actually has reached out for help and wants help, because those are the ones that are ready to listen and ready to heal and ready to move into a new phase of life. And I've heard from people that have done the MEAN workbook and listened to the show and said, after that, my life changed and our relationship changed and the results were amazing. I've heard both sides. I ended my relationship and our relationship became better than ever. I've heard both sides of that. And then I hear from people that nothing's changed. They just know more. And of course, I've heard from people that are still in a situation that hasn't changed, but they haven't really gotten into a space where they can do anything about it yet. So there's that middle ground as well. But like I said, share this with others that might benefit, just maybe not the person that's doing harm to you and they don't think they need help. I won't explain that every episode. I just wanted to iterate that because I know I say share this at the end of every episode. So I hope that makes sense. I appreciate you joining me today. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the MEAN Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships containing a 200-point checklist to help you not only pinpoint the exact behaviors causing the difficulties in your relationship, but also clearly reveal to you why you leave so many interactions feeling bad. The workbook will help you make the next best relationship decisions for both of you. Use it to understand your own behaviors and how they affect those you love, or use it together to reveal issues that you both need to work on. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant, because you are. Thank you again for joining me. We'll talk again soon.